Streaming, recording. Okay, good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to all you. Welcome also to everyone attending this Satsang online. We have a lot of great questions. We're going to keep our session a little shorter today, so I hope that's okay. Our first question comes from Chaitanya, who lives in Fremont, California. Is the prayer sarve bhavantu sukhinah, one of the prayers that we conclude our programs with, is it aligned with the teachings of Advaita Vedanta and the doctrine of karma? While it is possible to interpret sukha to mean contentment, and the prayer is to address the problem of suffering, the line sarve santu niramayaha looks impractical and not aligned with the teaching. Sarve santu sarve, all people, santu, may they be, amaya, without amaya. Amaya means illness. And we actually took this for our meditation session yesterday. So amaya means illness, both physical illness and emotional illness, mental illness. And I even suggested why not we extend it to societal illness, because we see broad-based, society-wide kinds of illnesses in this country and around the world. So the prayer says, sarve santu niramayaha, may all people be free from all forms of illness. Chaitanya suggests that it's impractical and not aligned with these teachings. Let's impractical. Will there ever be a day that no one suffers illness? Of course not. Not aligned with these teachings. Satchidananda Atma never has any kind of illness. So impractical from the sense of non-duality. But prayers are not written at that level of non-duality. Prayers are written, in fact, prayers are a matter of the heart, are they not? When you pray, you're not praying intellectually, so to speak. Prayers are an expression of our heart, of our feelings. And so we can simply acknowledge that actually this points to a much larger topic. The larger topic I'll just mention very briefly here is that 99.9999% of I'm exaggerating, of the teachings of Advaita Vedanta are dualistic. Only the concluding teachings of Advaita Vedanta are non-dualistic. And that's completely intentional, because teachings have to address you where you are, not where you want to be. The students need to be addressed at a level that's relevant. And what's relevant to the vast majority of people is duality. The vast majority of Advaita Vedanta teachings, including the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, everything, the vast majority of those teachings are footed in the realm of duality. And for the necessary reason I've just said, this prayer, of course, is part of that. So this prayer, at the level of duality, where you and I exist as individual beings, where you and I and all the people of the world are subject to various forms of illness, and where you and I and the world are all created by Ishvara. But isn't that duality? Yeah. At that level, this prayer is highly meaningful. Yeah, and certainly meaningful from just human experience. We all suffer, and relevant from the standpoint of our emotions, hearts. Prayers are of the heart. Okay, next question comes from Melissa, who lives in Alaska. Melissa says, I feel called to return to practice, but I'm unsure how to start. I have a mala, I have a Bhagavad Gita, and I have a Ganesha Murti. Nice, she uses the right word, Murti. What would be a good daily practice for someone starting again? With regard to prayer, that's highly personal. I can't give any advice. The prayers that are meaningful to you and the prayers that are meaningful to me are likely to be very different. Find some kind of prayer, preferably Sanskrit prayers, with the meaning that like what we just recited, sarve, bhavantu, sukhinah. Find some prayers that are meaningful to you. Recite those prayers with meaning. Some form of meditation is crucial. On my YouTube channel, there's a course in meditation. Begins with lesson 0. That's a good place to start. Also on our website, on the teachings page, there's a syllabus. And the syllabus is set up in such a way that it guides you to study things in a particular order. So that would be just some very simple practical advice. So for prayers, find some prayers that are meaningful to you. Learn and practice meditation each day, and go through the syllabus on our website. Next question from Manav, who lives in UK, Britain. Struggling to understand, it's quite long, so I'm going to paraphrase. There is a passage in Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras, which is an advanced text, in which and there are other passages elsewhere. I'll just summarize all this. In the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, there are passages which are sometimes demeaning to women. There are passages which are casteist. There are some teachings that will say only Brahmanas can study the Vedas. There are other passages that say Shudras and Mlechas cannot study Vedas. So we find these references interwoven into all of these teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Again, from the standpoint of Advaita, there are no castes, there's no men and no women. So I'm again making reference to the fact that the vast majority of these teachings are definitely at a level of duality, where we see a duality among men and women, we see a duality among different social statuses and different people and different cultures. Let's see. So I'm just scanning this because it's a long email. So there's some discomfort, and I relate to that discomfort completely. And I think we have arrived at a point in human culture where there's no room for any kind of discrimination whatsoever on any basis whatsoever. which means no discrimination between whether you are male, female, or all of the alternate genders and sexualities. People, that turns out to be a big button for people today. I don't get it. You know, we're all made different, and we're all made according to the laws of nature. And according to the nature, you might find yourself to be male, you might find yourself to be female, you might find yourself to be something unconventional. That's just the way people are born. Okay, that's nature. No basis for discrimination among social groups, among races, among ethnicities. Okay, we're grown-ups. What do they say? We're all grown-ups here. So we can handle this. There's no basis for any of that. So then how to relate to these passages that we find in Advaita texts, which seem to reflect these biases and different forms of discrimination. We just see it through the lens of history. So Shankaracharya was writing that, at least 1,200 years ago. The Upanishads were written 2,000 years ago. So we're dealing with ancient cultures, and there's no question that ancient cultures were by and large patriarchal. Ancient cultures also had these rigid social structures, just a product of society. Our job as modern students is to filter all that stuff out. What do they say? Filter out the noise. So filter out all that noise and stay focused on, the Sanskrit word is tatparya. Tatparya means what is intended to be conveyed by a particular text. Obviously, the intended meaning of the Upanishads and Shankara's works is not to condone any kind of segregation or discrimination. Manav has a second question regarding to the, I'll take this because it's a little interesting. They're all interesting questions. A question regarding the apaurusheyatvam of the Vedas. Now that may be an intimidating word. Purusha, person. Paurusha is that which comes from a person. Paurusheya is of human origin. Aparusheya is not of human origin. So there's a well-known teaching that the Vedas are aparusheya. They are not of human origin, which means it's not that someone figured all this stuff out and wrote it down. We call the ancient rishis, we call them mantra drashtaraha. Literally the seers of the Vedas. That's the literal translation of mantras, means the statements of the Vedas are all called mantras. So the rishis then received these teachings somehow. If you ask how, I say, I don't know. You'll have to ask them. I have no idea. They had some unique blessing, some special blessing that they were able to. They're also called, I've used this term before, kranta darshi, those who could see beyond, those who could access knowledge that is otherwise inaccessible. This is how we look at the rishis. So we don't say that the rishis wrote the Vedas. We say that they gave voice to the Vedas. Just a side issue here, because that will instantly trigger some people. Say, I can almost hear somebody out there has this question. What is the question? It says, does it mean that the Vedas were channeled? Right? Somebody has that question. The Vedas are channeled. And then they'll talk about this modern, there are some modern channelers and channeled entities. There's this entity Ramta, who's being channeled by some woman in California. Even in the Theosophical Society, there were these divine beings, and they were being channeled through the leaders of the Theosophical Society. So it's even in fairly modern times, it's a common notion. And of course, in modern days, most of this channeling business is, we discard it as being kind of silly, childish, foolish, whatever. And then suppose we apply that. Well, if this modern stuff, if this modern channeled teachings are garbage, if we can use that term, then wouldn't that apply equally to the Vedas? And here I think a simple distinction. You judge a subject matter by its content, not by its origin. Think about it. What is it that makes anything valuable? Is it the origin or the very nature of the thing? And we get this confused. We think of, I'm looking for a metaphor. Try this metaphor. How about a painting in a museum? And you'll consider that painting is valuable because it was painted by, say, Monet or Picasso or whoever, Renoir or whoever is your famous painter, your favorite painter. No, the reason it's hanging there in the museum is because of its beauty. It happens to be created by these artists, but if these artists were like me and it was some kind of silly stick figure, in fact, let's take this. Suppose I was a really big shot person and I paint a stick figure. It's not going to end up in a museum, right? Even if it's created by someone really important, it's not going to be hung in a museum because of its content. So let's distinguish origin versus content. Manav's question is about origin, and yes, it's true that the tradition considers these works aparusheya. That is the tradition. These works have outlived many aspects of that tradition. So that tradition includes these old societal problems of patriarchy and caste discrimination. And we've come to modern times when we may not be so comfortable accepting the idea of aparusheya. It was very important in ancient times because it got tied into a particular philosophy. I don't want to get into this. There's a particular ancient worldview called Spotavada, which regards sound and word as fundamental, elemental, and a whole philosophy is built on it. It's not a mainstream Hindu philosophy, and it's really not taught or accepted in Advaita Vedanta, called Spotavada. It turns out Spotavada and Aparusheya Vedas are highly related, all part of this ancient worldview. My personal, you don't have to agree with me on this. If I talk about Advaita Vedanta, you might want, it'd be good to agree with me, but I'm not talking about Advaita Vedanta. I'm sharing a personal opinion right now, and that is to place excessive value on some ancient worldviews, like the aparusheya's nature of the Vedas, is unnecessary. I'm not saying it's definitely not wrong. I'm just saying from a modern viewpoint, it's unnecessary because the content of the Vedas stands alone, on its own. The Sanskrit term swata siddha. The value of the Vedas is self-established doesn't depend on the apaurusheyatvam of the Vedas, the origin of the Vedas. Okay, enough said. Next question from Neil, who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. Many bhakti traditions speak of grace and surrender, with a tacit assumption that you, as an individual jiva, cannot accomplish the goal of moksha without the grace of both God and Guru. I think there's an oversimplification here, and I don't think we want to get in. Bhakti traditions are not one thing, so there are various bhakti traditions, and some will emphasize the blessings of Guru, some will emphasize the necessity of Ishvara's blessings, some will emphasize both, some will emphasize neither. So bhakti traditions is not one homogeneous thing. But anyway, Neil is talking about traditions that say you cannot accomplish the goal of moksha without the grace of both God and Guru. However, Neil says, Advaita Vedanta seems to really emphasize personal effort, shavana, manana, nididhyasana, to remove ignorance, almost implying that we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Neil is very thoughtful, but again, there's an oversimplification here. Because, yes, Advaita Vedanta says no one, maybe let's make this distinction. Actually, I'll see the end of his question, and then I'll make some comments. Does Advaita Vedanta agree? Actually, let's set that aside. Let's just pause here. Pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Different traditions make different claims about how you gain moksha. What he says, you can't get moksha without the grace of God and Guru. You can't get moksha without the grace of God. That's actually a teaching echoed in Christianity. It's only through God's grace that you are saved from damnation. And certainly we find among the various Hindu sampradayas, devotional groups, there are some that have that particular doctrine, which is very similar to Christianity. You pray, you accept God, you pray to God, and through God's mercy and compassion, you are saved. Saved, of course, would be the Christian word. You are liberated would be a more Vedantic word. Or in many Hindu traditional lineages, due to God's mercy, after you die, you go to be with God in some loka in your next, after this life comes to an end. So that is some bhakti traditions. Other traditions will put the emphasis on Guru. And not just traditions especially traditions that emphasize diksha, initiation. The Guru has some power, some shakti, and in a ritual of initiation, the Guru uses that shakti to impart something to the disciple which is crucial for the sake of gaining moksha. Advaita Vedanta doesn't subscribe to that at all. Guru doesn't have shakti. Guru has jnanam, knowledge, wisdom. From the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, and you've heard me say this before, no guru can make you enlightened. There's a but. As you might expect, no guru can make you enlightened. But without spiritual knowledge that's generally gained from a guru, you will not get enlightened. So I'll say that again. Guru can't make you enlightened, but the guru is the source of the spiritual teachings that you require for your own personal process of atma vichara, self-inquiry. When that self-inquiry is properly performed with the help of these teachings, then you gain enlightenment through your own effort. Now, we're back to this through your own effort argument. Through your own effort means it's not entirely up to you. I have two main factors. One is you need a source of that knowledge. If you practice atma vichara, self-inquiry, without proper guidance, I don't think you're going to accomplish anything significant. A second factor, however, so the argument for the necessity of guru is that the guru is the one who can impart these spiritual teachings to you. There's also an argument for the necessity of Ishvara's blessings, because if your mind is not properly prepared, this process of atma vichara will not be productive. So you need a mind that's capable of undergoing this very amazing journey of self-inquiry. And to have that kind of mind is not ordinary. We call it adhikaditva, preparedness. And definitely we can say that you gain preparedness with Ishvara's blessings. You gain this spiritual wisdom through the Guru's teachings, and with them both, through your own effort, you gain enlightenment. I think that answers Neil's question. Just a couple more. We'll keep this short. Amit, who lives in India, writes, At times I have difficulty believing that there is such a thing as a sukshma sharira, subtle body, that survives death. Maybe only consciousness remains. And he goes on at some length. Okay. And I don't mean to be facetious, but sukshma sharira, we've been studying in our online course. This is one of the current topics. I'm not sure if Amit is taking that course or not, but it's a major topic in Advaita Vedanta, that there is a subtle body that survives death. And according to the doctrine of karma, it's that subtle body that is then driven by the force of karma to acquire another physical body for the sake of exhausting karma palas, the fruits of prior actions, which have not yet been exhausted. And Amit says he has a hard time believing it, and it's okay. It is, first of all, it is a matter of belief. And it's closely associated with the doctrine of karma, which we've discussed on too many satsangs, that the doctrine of karma is a matter of belief. When I say matter of belief, let's be very clear. A matter of belief is something that can't be proved. It's something that can't be disproved. It lies outside of the scope of science and logic and proof. So it is indeterminate. So for that reason, you can't ask if a belief is true or false. You can't apply the words true and false because it is outside of the scope of being true or false. You may have heard me say this, and I feel this very strongly, this particular statement. The value of a belief is not in its truth or false, well, not false. The words I've used before. The value of any belief is not in its veracity. That word is chosen very carefully. Veracity means its truthfulness. The value of any belief is not in its veracity, which is indeterminate. The value of any belief is in its ability to help you. That's it. Turns out the doctrine of karma is immensely helpful for most people. Turns out that this teaching of sukshma sharira is immensely helpful. But now, in our current context of Advaita Vedanta, suppose you don't believe in the doctrine of karma. Okay, that's why I said kind of lightly at the beginning, okay, you don't believe in the doctrine of karma. In my opinion, it's not an impediment at all to your pursuit of enlightenment following the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Now to come to Amit's question, what if you don't believe in the sukshma sharira? Okay. And what I mean by okay is in my opinion, it is not an obstacle to your gaining enlightenment following the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. However, a little bit trickier because the teachings of Advaita Vedanta have incorporated this belief system, including the doctrine of karma, including sukshma sharira. This belief system, this ancient belief system, is embedded in the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. If you don't believe, it's absolutely not a showstopper, to use the American expression, but it will make things a bit more challenging for you. You'll have to kind of discern what is based on truth and what is part of this ancient belief system, and it's up to you'll have to make that discernment frequently as you go through these teachings. I would say those people who accept the doctrine of karma and the sukshma sharira just because they just believe, I think it's a little easier for them. If you don't believe, it may be a little bit more they just say there's an extra step you have to go through. That's all. And that extra step is discerning what is part of this ancient belief system and what are the central teachings of Advaita Vedanta. And let me just conclude this comment with this. The central teaching of Advaita Vedanta has nothing to do with any belief system. The central teaching of Advaita Vedanta is that your true nature is pure consciousness. That pure consciousness is the underlying reality because of which everything exists. That's what Mahavakya Tattvamasi means. Tvam, your true nature is pure consciousness, and that pure consciousness is the reality of all. That's not a matter of belief. That is a truth to be discovered through the practice of self-inquiry, guided by the teachings of Vedanta. And finally, Vedanta then does not teach the doctrine of karma as a matter of truth. The teachings of Vedanta do not teach sukshma sharira as an element of truth. These are part of the term used in pedagogy and teaching methodology is methodology, prakriya. Vedanta makes use of teaching methodologies, prakriyas. And prakriya is a means to an end. The end is the truth I just mentioned. The means to the end is not the book is not the knowledge. So prakriyas are many, and varied and not the essence. Anyway, I'm starting to go on too much here. Vishwajit, who lives in Bengaluru, asks, Advaita Vedanta teaches that we are in essence Brahman. Brahman is all-powerful. Why then does that power not dispel the darkness or ignorance in us? A language problem here. I think Vishwajit has conflated means confused, has conflated Brahman with the Western idea of God. And the ancient understanding of Brahman and the Western concept of an all-powerful God are completely different. So the Christians believe, and Jews and Muslims believe, God is all-powerful. Fine. And of course, if you ask them if your God is all-powerful, if you want to irritate one of your non-Hindu friends, you ask them this question. If your God is all-powerful and all-good, why does your all-powerful, all-good allow all this horrible suffering and chaos and misery and evil in the world? Better you shouldn't ask that question. You'll get in trouble, you'll lose your friend. And if you do, don't blame me. I'm telling you, don't do it. Okay. But this really, Brahman is not powerful. Let me make it clear. Brahman has no, to use a Sanskrit word, Brahman has no Shakti, power. Why? Brahman is the reality because of which Shakti exists. Brahman is a more fundamental reality than power. In the Hindu tradition, we make a distinction between a fundamental reality and Ishvara as creator, sustainer, destroyer. Ishvara, as if we want to use the word God, Ishvara as God, as creator, sustainer, destroyer. Ishvara has that power, has that Shakti. We call it Maya Shakti. And Maya here doesn't mean illusion, it means power of creation. Ishvara has Maya Shakti, Ishvara has a power of creation. But there's a more fundamental reality. The reality because of which Ishvara exists, we call Brahman. The fundamental reality because of which Ishvara's Shakti exists, we call Brahman. So let's not confuse Brahman and an all-powerful God. Okay. Related to this question, Julian, who lives in Germany, asks, how and why does Maya arise from Brahman? And it's related because it introduces a problem of intermixing these two levels of reality. From the standpoint of non-dual Brahman, there's only Brahman. There's no such thing as Maya. There's no such thing as Ishvara. There's no such thing as Jagat, the world. There's no such thing as jivas, individual beings. From the standpoint of non-dual Brahman, there's only Brahman. So from the standpoint of Brahman, you can't ask how and why. In fact, how and why are questions about creation, right? How and why does Maya arise? creation. Brahman doesn't create anything. We just got done saying that. Brahman is not the creator. Maya never arose from Brahman. I'll say that again because, if you're following Advaita Vedanta, this may sound a little confusing. Maya never arose from Brahman. To arise means it came. To come means it had a starting point. Maya has no starting point. Maya never began. Maya is eternal. So that which is eternal doesn't arise one day. Eternal. Now if you ask, if you allow me 1 minute of logic, from the standpoint of logic, this question is not a valid question because it's making this confusion between two levels of reality, an absolute level of reality, non-dual Brahman, at which, from the standpoint of non-dual Brahman, there's no creation, there's no causality. Let me make this point really clear. This is just 1 minute of logic. Causality belongs to the world. Brahman is beyond the world. Causality is meaningless from the standpoint of Brahman. Brahman didn't cause anything. Causality is meaningful from the standpoint of the world. So if you say, what is the cause for Maya? What is the origin of Maya? It's that eternal, beginningless. There is a beginningless Maya because of which the universe exists as we experience it. Uncaused, uncreated, eternal Maya. And that's said from the standpoint of the world according to the teachings of Vedanta. I think we'll take just one more question here. This question says, this person says, my wife suffers from extreme paranoid illness and refuses treatment. By paranoid illness, we might guess schizophrenia, maybe not, but severe mental illness. And it's really sad that so many people do suffer from serious forms of mental illness, which are debilitating for the person and cause immense suffering to everyone related to that person. Severe mental illness is like severe physical illness. If somebody is bedridden, think of how that bedridden person suffers, and think of how it affects you when your loved one is bedridden. Well, serious mental illness like schizophrenia is no different. It is debilitating for the person with the illness, and it has tremendous consequences for everyone associated with that person. So she suffers mental illness, she refuses treatment. Because of this, the family is under constant pressure. You can understand. She is highly religious. She prays regularly, goes to the temple, she listens to devotional songs. So why doesn't God make her realize her condition? This is the question. I ask this because most of her actions are harmful to me and our kids and leads to accumulation of bad karma. Okay. Difficult for family members when wife and mother is suffering from serious mental illness. Why doesn't God make her realize her condition? And this is a topic we've discussed here on many occasions. I'll just say briefly that we have to come to a more mature understanding of who is Ishvara. And to look upon Ishvara as some divine being who can dispense blessings upon you when you pray. I know there are stories in scriptures that describe Prahlada and so many others who are praying and all the miracles that were performed to help them. Those stories are wonderful, they're helpful, have profound messages, but they're stories. And stories are meant for children, and we're not children anymore. So I don't mean to speak harshly of these stories. The stories are wonderful, and the stories have important religious and spiritual messages. But that's usually not how they're understood. Prahlada prayed, he was saved from death. So then why shouldn't I pray for God to save my wife from all of her suffering? So if we understand these stories as stories which have tremendous religious and spiritual implications, but these stories are not to be taken as literal truths, then we can start to build a more mature understanding of who is Ishvara and how does prayer work. From the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, Ishvara is karma phala data, the giver of the fruits of our deeds. And that's a basis for prayer, because prayer is a karma. And when you pray, that prayer as a karma will have a particular result. But that result comes according to the laws of karma and are dispensed by Ishvara. The laws of karma are like Ishvara's mind. According to the mind of Ishvara, our prayers are answered, but prayers are answered according to Ishvara's laws, not according to your wishes. You may pray for a particular thing. Does it mean you're in charge? And because you pray for that particular thing, your prayer forces Ishvara to give you what you want, even though it violates the laws of the universe, even though it violates the laws of karma. You pray for something and Ishvara is going to, for you, perform a miracle. You know, these stories are based on unique situations. Perhaps there was a Prahlada who prayed and received miracles. That was a unique situation. That was a miraculous situation. In our lives, there are few, if any, miracles, but there are many ways in which prayer can bless all of us. So let me end with this observation. Ishvara is not one who is going to perform a miracle to remove the wife's mental illness. Doesn't work like that. Like Jesus, who cured, according to the stories, Jesus had the power to raise from the dead and to cure mental illness. And we find similar stories in Hindu scriptures as well. Instead of praying for a miracle, to pray for a miracle Just let me put it in simple American English. To pray for a miracle is a long shot. Wouldn't it make sense to pray in a more practical way, in a more mature way, I would say? And to pray in a more mature way is to pray first and foremost for yourself to be more understanding, more compassionate, and more skillful as a caregiver to a mentally ill person who refuses treatment. First and foremost, you, the caregiver, needs to be blessed by prayer. Secondly, if you are more understanding, compassionate, and skillful, won't that help the person who's suffering with mental illness? Of course. That's how your prayer, through changing you, your prayer can bless that mentally ill person. So instead of praying for the miraculous remission, how many people pray for miracles? You pray for the miraculous remission of cancer. You pray for the miraculous remission of coronary artery disease, the remission of this mental illness. To pray for miracles, as I said, is a long shot. Why not we adopt a more mature attitude towards prayer, and instead of praying for a miracle, we pray for things that can truly help here and now in our lives with Ishwara's blessings. Okay, so we will keep our session short today and conclude with a prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.